Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everybody to episode 37 of Garden of Doom. Today is April 9th. You'll probably see this podcast either tonight or tomorrow, but we are continuing our series with the Nephilim Anthropology Conference taking place virtually in the UK April 24th. So the information on registering will be in the show notes, and we'll also do our best to say it in the context of the podcast as well. My guest this week is Andrew Goff. He is a writer, a presenter, and he's an editor of historical mysteries. He's appeared on television shows on networks including Discovery Science, Smithsonian, National Geographic, and the History Channel. He's based out of the UK, so there's a bunch of shows also that were on UK5 and other networks that I'm sure you folks in the UK are more familiar with. And he is going to talk to us today about, well, he's got a whole lot of information here, and some of it ties back to the Nephilim and just all sorts of things that I'm fascinated in and things we've touched on the show. So really looking forward to our conversation with Andrew. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Jeff, I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
No, it's my pleasure. So is there anything I missed there? Anything you want to tell the folks about yourself?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty good. I think you can probably tell by my accent that I'm not from the UK. I hail from Chicago, and I've been in London since 1997. So this is home, as it were.
So you're not a spy.
Well, there is a belief, and it just cracks me up from people who have known me for ages, that I'm some kind of CIA operative, and I wish that were true. It would be a lot more exciting than my day job, but let's not even go there.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't tell me if you were anyway. So you've broken up your series into what you call the honeycombs, and I was just wondering if it's because things are connected but compartmentalized, or is it just a nice graphic where you can put things in boxes, but they're not necessarily connected? They're interloops, or like the Olympic rings or something.
Wow, that's a great question. You know, I never really, I'll get a lot of abuse for this, but I never really paid attention to these. I was chairman of the Historical Society that studied the mysteries of Rennes-le-Chateau, that priest in the south of France. 1981, he discovered some scrolls when he's renovating his church. They're really old. The vicar says, the bishop says, go to Saint-Sulpice in Paris. They'll help you decipher them. This is the story of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. He comes back to the south of France. He's a rich man. He's obsessed with Mary Magdalene. What did he discover, et cetera, et cetera. So I was chairman of this historical society that studied the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau. The mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau was the foundation of the Da Vinci Code. The priest was called Saunier. Saunier in the Da Vinci Code is the name of the curator, who's laid out in the form of a pentagram, etc. Dan Brown was obsessed with the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau, and so was I. And I got I met by accident a German Kabbalist in Catalan who worked with Salvador Dali and Jean Cocteau and invited me to study with her. And I went there to study the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau and the parchments, and I was all psyched for that. And we were having breakfast on her balcony on the coast in Catalan when this huge bee entered the room and started flying around, and we got talking about bees. And for the next 3 years, I studied with her only the subject of bees and the esoteric history of bees. And that led me to write a whole lot of pieces about the esoteric history of bees, which ultimately led to my design of my website, which is kind of a honeycomb design. So long-winded answer to say, you think you're going one way, you end up going somewhere else.
So I overthought the symbology of it. Tying it back into Robert Langdon, the symbologist. You know what? It sounds like you just booked yourself for 2 more shows. One, the esoteric history of bees, and more about the Da Vinci Code and the historic ties to it. But that's not the purpose of this show. And, since it's on the record, you've obviously agreed. Oh, yes, I see him shaking his head excitedly. Yeah. No, he's not doing anything of the sort. But I'm serious. But another time when you're done with the conference and such. So, a lot of your articles and your work started basically with missing relics and tying to the Hollow Earth. I don't know if you want to start with that and work our way to the tie-ins with the Nephilim, or you want to start with the Nephilim and then work sort of into the subject matter that you studied and put forth out there. There's so much stuff here, folks. We're not going to have enough time, I have to tell you.
Yeah, well, it's so curious that you brought up the bees, because that's probably what I'm best known for. And the bees led to my getting into the whole Hollow Earth thing because, and this is going to sound really roundabout, but I was presenting my, I call it Hidden Hive of History presentation at the Glastonbury Festival, the Megalithic Mania Festival, and Michael Cremo, Graham Hancock, everyone's there. Klaus Dana is there, and Klaus Dana had a hotel room right next to mine. The door was right next to mine, and we got to talking. And this guy's amazing. He's like the world's expert on ancient relics, and I just thought he was really cool. So I asked him to write for my magazine, The Heretic, and he never replied. And years went by. And in that time, I started doing television programs as a subject area expert, talking about this or that. And one of the very first things I was asked to do was the story of Roger Rojas and Yamashita's gold. And if I'm honest, I knew next to nothing about it. But I said, of course, I know everything about it. It's great. I'll research it, and I'll be great on the day. And I got so into this story about this poor treasure hunter who ends up finding, an amazing deposit of gold, and eventually being killed by his president, Marcos. But there's tons of other deposits of gold in the Philippines. So I become quite obsessive about this. And make a long story short, Years later, I reached out to Klaus Donna one last time to ask him if he'll write for my magazine. And for some reason, I mentioned the Philippines and my interest in this subject. And he says, hey, I'm in the Philippines. Because he had disappeared for years, and he had gone totally dark, and no one knew where the heck he was. And he's in the Philippines, and he's discovered a former Japanese military base that's full of treasure. And we got to talking, and we're talking all the time, and we're talking every day. And I wish it was me, but he has this amazing system. It's a bit of ancient old school, and it's a bit of really modern new school technology where he can find precisely where things are buried across the globe. And he used this to find the sites where he has successfully dug. And I just did a 2-hour special for Discovery Channel, episode 1 of Forbidden History Series 6, where we go down 200 feet into the ground in the man-made tunnels in the Philippines that he was able to find using this technology. And so it's Klaus that got me into this idea that there's incredible relics that are buried all over the globe.
So, okay. So this is the missing relics. Do we know which relics, or do we just know that they're missing, or other than gold, are we looking for, I don't know, I'm going to come up with the most trope ones, but the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, Dead Sea Scrolls, the Library of Alexandria?
Well, what's really, so it's all of that. And as ridiculous as it sounds, Klaus, is a great guy. He's in his early 70s, I think. Amazing guy. And he came to me one day and said, Oak Island, the real stuff isn't on Oak Island. Let me tell you where it is, because it's not far away from Oak Island, and I won't repeat it, but you wouldn't believe what is there. And he gave me all the coordinates of where it's at as a gift to me. And I said, wow, thank you. It's amazing. I'm humbled. But that's Nova Scotia. I live in England. And he said, okay, well, where do you want me to look? And I know this is going to sound nuts, but I was contacted on LinkedIn a couple months earlier by a guy who said, I love your TV work. I'm a producer. Let me know if I can help. Pick out somebody on my LinkedIn, and I'll put you in touch with them. So I look at his LinkedIn, and they're all A-listers. There's Brad Pitt. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? And he came to me and said, listen, I'm going to tell you something. You can tell me to bugger off, but I'm just going to tell you how you need to think of me. Okay, go ahead. He said, think Illuminati. I'm like, oh, God. So I've been head of these historical societies, and everyone is like a member of the Illuminati, and it just bores me to tears. And so I meet him. He shares some things. He tells me some things. He tells me Notre Dame is going to burn.
Before the fire.
Yeah, and so now I'm kind of convinced that this guy is legit. And he's been telling me, and I'm not going to say the name of the city because I just shouldn't, but there's a city in England, and he asked me, have you been there? I'm like, yeah, I've been there. I've written about it. It's on my website. Oh, okay. You got to check it out. There's some stuff there. And so when Klaus says, where do you want me to scan for you? I say this town. And he comes back and says, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what I found. And then over the next week and month and 6 months and year, we found all this amazing stuff. And we've mapped out the entire town. You know those underground cities in Cappadocia that are like 30 levels down? They let the public go to the first 10 levels down. But who built them? Why? When? This place is just like that. And we started to excavate, and we failed. I have to show up. I'm knocking someone's door, literally, and say, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm 30 seconds. We think there's something really valuable in your property. We think it's probably from the Knights Templar. There's a world-famous World Heritage Knights Templar cave right down the street, as you're aware, and we think that there's one on your property. Could I have just a few minutes of your time to explain how we'd like to excavate that? So, did that, got the guy on my side, and in his back garden there's this huge, just peculiar well that's really ancient. So we dig in that, nothing. I have the world's greatest dowsers. I have the world's greatest GPS technology. I have everything telling me that there's something anomalous there, but we failed. And to make a really long story short, a lot of these sites that are buried, that have treasure in them, even the Japanese and the Shinto priest presided over the burial of treasure they looted from 12 Asian countries over 100 years. It's imbued with magic. It's protected. So at this place in England, we had to get permission from the person who is protecting it. And this is way, way woo-woo for me. I'm not into this kind of thing. But we got a medium, and the medium was able to identify that an anchoress, a very famous book, The Anchoress of Shira, a young woman, usually always a virgin, usually 10, 12 years old, decides they want to dedicate their life to God, and they're asked to have a cell built around them for the rest of their life. They'll never leave that cell. And people will put their food in and take out the waste, and that's it. The anchoress has been protecting this site. So we now have permission from the anchoress to proceed. And at the moment, COVID is stopping us because we know what's down there. We've had 2 different satellites, some of the world's most powerful satellites, focus on what's in the ground. And it comes, the one guy who we've determined works for an offshoot of the CIA, I know that sounds nuts, said, I want 5,000 pounds. And I said, I'm not going to give you 5,000 pounds, so forget about it. We don't need your satellite image. I approached him a few weeks later and I said, I tell you what, I'll give you 500 pounds or 1%. And he said, just give me the 500 pounds. So we did the satellite reading of this chap's yard, his garden, and he came back and said, I've been doing this for a week. I've done it 50 times over again. I can't freaking believe it. Is it too late to ask for the 1%? So this technology works. We sent somebody to the office and said, go look in this spot and dig 3.5 meters and you'll find something Knights Templar. They came back with a huge blue box. I'll show a picture of this in the presentation, with the world's oldest Aramaic Bible. This technology has found things in Russia, Africa. It's never wrong. And so we're excited about that. But the big question is, you're the Knights Templar. You've gone all over the world, and you've taken treasure from South America, from the East, from the Americas, from everywhere. Times are hard. Build a castle. Get some slaves, if that's what you do back in the 13th century. But no, you bury it. Why do you bury it? Now, why do you bury it above other relics from even more ancient times that have been buried deeper?
Do you find the answers to those questions?
I presented, what I'm going to present at the conference, the Nephilim conference, is a condensed version of what I presented for a couple hours in December in the south of England. And I said, and this is all Klaus Dana, I wish it was me. Klaus Dana, who has this technology, has noticed, and I've worked with them on it, that all over the world, there's chambers at 67 meters. And we're like, 67 meters? You know, it's over 200 feet. But it's the exact amount all over the world. And someone said, well, maybe it's 66.6 from the audience. And I went, no, couldn't be. So we went back and really fine-tuned the mechanism, and it's 66.6 meters. But in many of those places, above it, at like 20 to 25 meters, there's something really old. Above that, at about 8 meters, is the Knights Templar stuff. They knew that the other stuff was already there. So that got me really kind of weirded out. So I researched the Hollow Earth and tried to find an explanation for why what appears to be multiple races on Earth over a very long period of time have buried relics, physical objects, but also information about arts and sciences. Why has it all been buried, and how did they all know that it was there, and there? And what I found really surprised me.
Let me take a break or go back a little bit. What is the significance of 66.6? Is it just the 6.666, the number of the beast? Is it something else? Is it tied to sacred geometry? What is the 66.6?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, the obvious thing is that it's the mark of the beast. For lack of a better explanation, that's what our culture refers to it as. 666 is the mark of the beast. It's a Satanic symbolic number that you see a lot of different places. Today, as we're speaking, Prince Philip died, 99 years old, on the 9th day of April. Flip those 3 9s around, that's 666. You can get crazy about this kind of stuff, but you were living in a time, and I'm not getting political at all, but there's millions of us who believe we see something, and there's billions of everyone else who thinks we're nuts. And those millions of us who think we see something realize there's a satanic cabal, a satanic elite who has imprisoned humanity for thousands of years and is partaking in human trafficking, in particular child sacrificing for adrenochrome to have this elixir, but also to serve their gods. We think that we can cull cows and lambs and have that lovely veal and we're the top of the food chain, but we're not. So there's evil in the world. I do think the head of that snake has been cut off. And as we enter Aquarius, they realize that there is a awakening that's inevitable. So this whole COVID, what I believe to be scam, is an attempt to try and make a final effort to subdue humanity at a time when they are poised to uprise. So the 66.6 is really interesting. And when we used some alternative questioning to understand who put these chambers at 66.6 meters and what's in them, the answer was grays and gold. So the grays have gold in those chambers. But above those, and many of those, there's one in Argentina that has a mark that you can see from satellites that is so unusual that it draws your attention to the fact that what the heck is there?
So let me ask you a couple of things. One, the grays and gold. So this is very similar to I think it was Sitchin who had that's his theory of the Anunnaki.
Yeah.
So same thing. So right. So it's the same story. I'm not mixing that up. And then the other things. What is this technology measuring for that it's finding? I mean, I guess if it was somehow could measure gold, that makes sense. I don't want to get too Ghostbuster-ish, but if it was like, I'm almost picturing like something that measures magic, like the Ghostbuster beams could catch the ghost or something like that. That also makes sense. I mean, you have to skip a bunch of other dots to get there, but that at least makes sense as the end game. So what is it that it's measuring, and why doesn't he have a patent on it, or does he have a patent on it?
Yeah, well, thanks to me, I'm afraid, he's had years of analysis of sites all over the world stolen. Yeah, I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of shows about the gold that the Japanese buried in the Philippines at the end of World War II. They're not going to make it back to Japan. They spent 100 years pillaging every bank, every private gold collection, every museum, everything. And so they bury it in the Philippines. And I have people in the Philippines who contact me all the time because they believe that their village has treasure in it. And one guy in particular wanted me to employ somebody who had a satellite, because I told him I have a site in England that I know is full of all kinds of wondrous stuff. And so it's that guy that I employed. And when I employed him to do the satellite, that same day, all of Klaus's work was stolen off his machine somehow.
So it's already been replicated, is what you're saying.
And so I actually, without getting too convoluted, I went back to my Illuminati friend and I said, this really pisses me off. Let me give you this guy's name. You come back and tell me who he is. And he came back right away, and he had so much detail. This guy worked in the military in Iraq, and he now works for the space program as a subsidiary of the CIA. And so the good news is I know the satellites they use are the most powerful in the world that confirmed what Klaus's technology said was there. The satellite, if I could show you these images, you'd be like, holy shit. But everyone's looking for this. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about in the conference is, have you seen Tom Cruise in the movie The Mummy?
I have not.
You know, it's so interesting because obviously Mummy, they're in Egypt, but they come back to London, and the whole crust of what happens in London is there's the Crosstown Rail project, which is true. So it's a train initiative to put more train lines from London outwards into the country, and it's called the Crosstown Rail. And in the movie, the Crosstown Rail is delayed because they have found a Knights Templar chamber. And what they find in that chamber is unbelievable, and Tom Cruise is involved, and it's all pretty spectacular. What my Illuminati guy has said, independent of that, before I ever saw it, before it ever came out, was that the Crosstown Rail is a real project. I mean, it's a real project. What we hear about in the newspapers every week. The reason it exists is that they're looking for it. They can't, and it's delayed because they can't find it. There's something they're looking for that is buried. And you know, so I got really obsessive about this. Well, what's buried and who's looking for it? And if you look at some of the great writers who have written about the Hollow Earth, if you believe them, they've been approached by initiates from the Hollow Earth who have said, this is what I'm going to tell you. The whole Earth is a checkerboard. And we have buried the history of arts and sciences from this planet, which is 4.5 billion years old. Don't think for a second it's only civilized inhabitants. We've buried it so you don't screw it up. And in a day when you can actually use it, and we can trust you with it, it will all be revealed. But until that time, if you try to find it, you may find it, but you'll never leave alive. I mean, vivid accounts of stay the hell away from this stuff until we decide it's, ready to be revealed. So Klaus and I have what we call Project Restoration, and you could say we're a bit impatient. We're digging for it.
So you're not afraid of the warning. You're traveler beware. Here there be monsters. You're willing to face the consequences.
Yes, and oddly enough, my Illuminati friend also is keen on this. I have to kind of keep him at arm's length. I'm confident he won't hear this podcast, but no, I think the time is right. I mean, I think the head of the snake of the evil satanic cabal elite has been cut off, and I think you'll see the fruits of that very soon. You see what's going on with Evergreen and the Suez Canal. You see, I was not a Trump fan. I didn't like Trump. I grew up in Illinois. So take a guess what my affiliation is. Illinois is blue.
Big blue.
My parents, my brothers, my sisters. But it took me a while to realize that the left wing and the right wing is part of the same bird, and the bird is corrupt, and it's satanically corrupt. And now that has been, dare I say, defeated. I mean, look at Hollywood. All the people I love in Hollywood. Have you ever heard people scream so much about a president as they've screamed about Donald Trump? He's narcissistic, right? Okay, and he tweets and he's annoying, but you have to walk around with his head, bloody head in your hand, and all the celebrations when he left. It's because they're part of this satanic child. Look at Google Roseanne Barr or Mel Gibson. What do they say? Hollywood is centered on the satanic child sacrifice cult. It's what they do. If you want to eat children and get your adrenochrome, you'll have a career. Cappy just got assassinated, a couple months ago for outing Spielberg and Tom Hanks, who's a Rockefeller.
I'm sorry, who? Who's Cappy?
He is kind of a B-level actor. He's been in a lot of films that you'd recognize, and he, because he was in the industry, saw what it was comprised of, and went out and became a very vocal proponent of, let me tell you what's really going on, guys. And they found him having committed suicide by jumping off a bridge about 3 months ago or so. Forgive me, I can't think of his full name. I've just known him as Cappy for so long. If you Google Cappy, he's really intelligent, but he's also quite funky. He's doing videos and songs about all of this.
Can I ask another question that is maybe stupid, but I'm going to risk it? Because, if the Greys were burying the gold, or it's being preserved because the Greys need the gold, and, I mean, gold is precious, but we also use it for fillings and other things, and I know there's different values of gold. Anyway, instead of going through my knowledge or not knowledge of gold, to say it's finite. So what happens when we run out of gold, when they've gotten all the gold from Earth? What happens then?
Well, yeah, and it's not just the Greys, and I'm not saying that I believe that, but that's just what we were given, what we were told. And you mentioned Sitchin earlier. So Sitchin talks about how humans were manufactured as hybrids to do the god's toil, and part of that toil was mining the gold in Africa, and gold was useful for the crafts in order to go through the universe in a way that was not possible if they didn't have gold as part of the outer lining of their crafts, as I understand it. So is gold unique somehow to Earth? I don't know. But what I do know, which has just flabbergasted me, and I keep looking, I'm always looking for the fraud. There was this guy, Ben Hammett, who hired the special effects, Academy Award-winning special effects guy for RoboCop and Star Wars, created a picture of a tomb in the south of France, and said it was Mary Magdalene's tomb. And a movie was made about it, tours, many books. And I spent 5 years, and I busted him. And I forced a confession, and he thanked me for the confession. So when I hear stuff that's sensational, I want to prove that it's just bollocks. I really do. But
I found him, by the way. His name is Isaac Cappy, with a K.
Isaac, of course, it's Isaac Cappy. Thank you. And if no one's familiar with him, Google Isaac Cappy. And just be patient, because he'll come across a bit nutty and flippant, but he knows his stuff.
Well, he was in Thor. He was in Terminator Salvation. He was in Breaking Bad. He was also of a member of a band called Monster Paw, so he's been in big properties.
Yeah, and he has outed so many of the Hollywood A-listers that, and repeatedly with details. He details a 5-hour conversation he had with Jim Carrey, where Jim Carrey wants out. Jim Carrey wants to deal with QAnon because he knows he's already sold his soul. And it's just such an interesting time right now. And I think that going back to this checkerboard of treasure, but not just Ark of the Covenant kind of stuff, relics of each era of occupation of Earth, and including arts and sciences. If you look at the images of Earth from the 70s and the 60s, from US, from Europe, from ESA, from Russia, they all show the same thing. The poles are wide open. Now they're redacted white. But the poles are wide open. It's like you see a globe, but then where the North Pole and South Pole is, it's just a circle, and it's dark, and it appears to be open. And the Russian mirror craft took a spectacular image. So did ESA in Europe, and so did NASA. Now they're all redacted. But now we're getting images of Saturn, which are very current. And you look at Saturn, and you look at the pole. You see the whole planet of Saturn, and it looks like, a nice, contiguous, solid substance. Then you look at the pole, and there's an octagon. And it's totally different than the rest of the planet. So are they redacting the pole? Is the poles somehow where the access to the inner Earth is? And for your listeners who are thinking that I'm mad, Haley, Euler, Gauss, all the great scientists have said the Earth has multiple layers within. There's oceans, there's rivers, and there's probably suns, and it's probably inhabited. In fact, there's one guy, Tweed, who believes, the scientist does, that we're not even on the outside. We're in the inner Earth. And I think you and I were talking before the show about the hollow Earth, and I think you made a little joke about Godzilla. The last Godzilla film, 2021, features the hollow Earth.
It sure does.
And what's so interesting is that Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and the most decorated man in the history of the U.S. military, Byrd, both cite a mammoth in the hollow Earth. Jules Verne talks about a mammoth in the hollow Earth, and Byrd kept a diary, and as he's flying 4 hours from his base, all his equipment starts to malfunction. 4.5 hours later, he sees all green. How can he see green? He's in the Arctic. And then 5 hours into his flight, he sees a mammal. And he's like, what the hell? If I lost my mind, there's a mammal down there. And then 5.5 hours or 6 hours into it, he sees a crystal city in the distance, and there's planes next to him with swastikas, and they land his plane on the ground, and he meets this ruler of the inner Earth who tells him, when your culture has been decimated, we will come out and help you, because we have all the records of arts and sciences that you should have always have had, but have been kept from you. And I think that time is now. We're coming out of this time of enslavement. The head of the snake has been cut off. And whether the world is made aware of the atrocities that have been taking place, or that they've even been enslaved, we'll have to see. But I think you'll see some significant reconfiguration of the political system in the U.S. and in Europe. And all these prophecies say when that happens, then all this wonderful information will be revealed to us, and the stuff Tesla was talking about, and free energy, and all that kind of stuff. So I've become inadvertently quite fascinated with this whole notion of a hollow Earth.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's probably my age and was more into like the comics or the fantasy, there was Tolkien with Middle Earth, which, I mean, if you take it on its face to be Middle Earth, it's consistent with that. And of course, Marvel had the Savage Land, which was a sort of a Garden of Eden in semi-prehistoric times in the middle of, I think, Antarctica. It doesn't really matter which pole it was in for the purpose of this, and other sort of enclaves, in hidden parts of the world thought to be uninhabitable. There's others. There's other stories too, of course, that in literature. So we've got the Hollow Earth, and they were the Greys, and they used the burials. You spent a lot of time, or at least one of your work spends a lot of time talking about the green people and comparing the green people to the Rama and the Hindu gods that were blue. I don't know if I'll let you speak for yourself on that. Are you drawing a parallel between the green people, the blue people, and maybe the Greys as one and the same, or competing races, or what?
Yeah, well, in a way, I kind of regret mentioning the Greys because I honestly know nothing about them or why or when they created these chambers of gold at 66.6 meters. But I do know that we have found, Klaus has found, working with Klaus, he has found that wherever they exist, there's slightly newer chambers, not as deep, and Knights Templar ones above that, and Celtic ones as well. So somehow there was this universal understanding that, one, we need to bury stuff because it'll fall into the wrong hands, or the world will really need it, so we need to preserve it. And what I find interesting here in England is there's a great account from the 12th century, 13th century. It's the Green Children of Woolput, which is up around Norfolk, around Cambridge. And there was this guy, William of Newburgh, it's like 1186 or something, and he's like the blogger of his day. So in real time, he interviews these two kids who appear out of nowhere in a little village, and they're green. And they can't eat. They can't eat human food. The boy dies from malnutrition. The girl survives. She eventually learns how to speak English. And when she does, she's interviewed and says that she and her brother came from St. Martin's Land. And it's a place underground nearby. They heard the bells of what they eventually learned was a church, and they were walking up a mountain, and before they knew it, they were out. And they have an inner sun, and off in the distance there's another land that has its own ocean. And she grew up to be a relatively normal adult, other than they observed her rather wanton behavior, which always made me laugh. But they were green. So it got me thinking, okay, so if you don't really have the same kind of sun that we do, and you're living in the inner earth, and you're green, and your skin is green because of that, is there other tradition of green people that might be relevant? Well, you have Osiris, which is the god of the underworld, and he's green. The original depiction of the devil was green-skinned. The original depiction of the knight in the Arthurian legend is that he was green-skinned. And of course, we're approaching May Day, which is when the Green Man and the god of fertility is out as, well, the Green Man. But what if the Green Man is green just because he's from the inner earth? And in the Hindu tradition, a lot of their gods are bluish or green, and the word for blue and green is very, very similar. So I just asked the question, is this thing that we attribute as fertility, i.e. green, really more of an indication of somebody who is from the inner earth?
Wow. So in Arthur, I think that you made reference to the Green Knight, and he's, of course, the fellow that challenged any of the knights to a decapitation contest, and whoever won got to come back next year, and they'd have a rematch. And Gawain said, okay, no problem, but I want to go first. And I said, okay, no problem. And Gawain cut his head off. And then a year later, he goes off follows the directions to this castle. And he's like, well, the guy's dead. No problem. There's the Green Knight with his head back on. So now, as I recall, the Green Knight, sort of was like Gawain, and they became best friends, sort of like Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Yeah. But is that the Green Knight? Because that Green Knight was also depicted as, sort of a giant, not a giant like 30 feet tall, but a giant like, probably like 8 or 9 feet tall, or, bigger than a man.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you're kind of gently heading towards that whole concept of the Nephilim, which is this sort of literally Goliath kind of figure from the Hebrew Bible that translates as a giant or some other worldly being. And sure enough, there's so many tales of giants in the inner earth. In fact, if you look at the King James Bible, before it was really heavily edited, there's that famous biblical quote that people recognize as, in those days, there were giants on the earth. The King James Bible says, in those days, there were giants in the earth.
Yeah.
Nephilim, in the earth. And there's a famous account, I think it's called a book, The Smoky God, I think it's called. Forgive me if I've got that wrong, but it's 2 Nordic sailors, a father and a son. They get lost in a bad storm. They end up in this place on a shore they've never seen before that is full of giants who live to 800 years old, and they have these fast-moving crafts, and they told them all these amazing things. The father and the son eventually escape and leave. The father dies. The son makes it back and tells everyone, and they put him in an insane asylum for the rest of his life. But birds saw giants. So many different people who have had experiences in the inner earth all refer to the giants. And the giants are really discredited. We've all seen these incredible Photoshop images of a huge human skull the size of a 50 feet long or something like that, but it's been Photoshopped. I did a show for Forbidden History on the giants of Sardinia, and these farmers have been just devastated. They have found incredible archaeological things that show massive skeletons, show Nephilim, and the archaeologists have just shown up, taken them, and paid them off. So it's a very, very interesting subject, that of the giants. People ask, why isn't there archaeological proof? It's a good question. It's been covered up. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but I personally have spoken to people who have had this stuff taken from them.
I want to get back to one thing that you mentioned earlier. I think it was in context of Admiral Byrd and his discoveries through the Antarctic. He said that he found, fields of green, and it looked like there were walls, and there were the swastikas there. Now, we have to talk about the swastikas because I'm not sure that everybody knows, though probably all of the listeners to this show probably do, but we have new listeners every week, which is a good thing. And the swastika was conscripted by the Nazis from Eastern cultures, where it meant nothing similar to a contorted cross. I believe it was a sign of fertility and the harvest and all sorts of, basically life. It was basically like an ankh, if I'm not mistaken. So what the swastika means to us today, and we all know why, is a lot different than what it meant prior to the Nazis and certainly hundreds and thousands of years ago. But we also have heard the stories of Nazi exploration in the Antarctic region. And was it a Nazi base that the bird came across, or was it the ancient culture, probably using more of the Eastern historic or pre-Nazi historic millennia old use of the swastika? And am I even right?
Absolutely. It's a great question, because the swastika is a very ancient sacred symbol in this valley, Indian culture in particular. It's very, very prevalent in ancient times, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, that sort of thing. And the Nazis adopted it, of course, because Hitler and Himmler and Wehrmacht were obsessed with trying to prove their ancient Aryan origins. And so they adopted these ancient symbols because they wanted people to believe that they were, well, in the case of Himmler, he wanted people to believe they were a couple 100,000 years old of a culture. But in any case, your question is really on point, because did Byrd see a sign of that ancient culture? And in the ancient Indian culture, you have images on these temple walls of aircraft and all kinds of equipment that we recognize as modern warfare equipment and stuff. So it could be that he saw ancient craft as depicted in parts of the world, like India, that used a swastika, or it could depict the Nazis, who, of course, claimed to have found the inner Earth. They produced maps for submarines, for U-boats, to find very detailed maps, and you can still find them. They're authentic. Go here, go this deep, turn left, go north, etc. There's even letters from a mission that found it, came out and sent a correspondence back in a letter, then went back in the inner Earth, and they said, we're not leaving. This is much better than, what's on top of the Earth. And of course, Hitler has been associated with the inner Earth, and the Nazis have obsessed about it. So it's a great question. I don't know what the answer is. Did Byrd see a Nazi craft, or did he see an true ancient Aryan craft as depicted on the walls in Indian temples?
When was Byrd's journeys?
High jump, which is the one where he kept the diary, if I'm not mistaken, was 1946 or thereabouts. Forgive me if I'm off by a little bit. And when he came out of that, he did an interview with a newspaper in Chile, and he expressed his fear for America being attacked by these craft, which I think the leader of the inner Earth told him these craft were fired upon in World War II, and they were called Fuhrer or something like that. And the government just came down on him big time and said, you cannot give interviews, you cannot talk about this with anyone. And in his final mission in Antarctica, he came out of that and said, I've something to the fact of, I have seen the center of the great unknown. So basically, in his words, saying that he has seen the inner Earth.
In Indian folklore or tradition, we'll use tradition. I think are you speaking of the Veda?
You mean the images of the ancient craft and
well, I think the crafts have their own names, but I think the people writ large are sort of called either the Veda or they might be the Anunnaki also, because I know that they were distinct from the panoply of the Indian gods. That there were the blue people, and then there were another color people who were in these flying vehicles. I think the Veneda, something.
Yeah. Forgive me. I know exactly what you're talking about now. Yes, I mean they have an amazing tradition of that exact same thing, and it, we were talking earlier. You mentioned that I write about. Every country on the planet's got a tradition of a hollow earth, whether they're elves who live underground or you name it. Every part of the globe has a tradition of this, but I think the most famous is Shangri-La, and it leads us to this whole awareness that the Dalai Lama is supposedly the terrestrial representative of the leader of the world who resides inside the earth. And in 1985, Dalai Lama had this amazing quote that said, "It's a real physical place, but you can't go there unless your karmic connection allows you to. In other words, unless your parents were born there, unless your lineage is there. It's real, it's pure, but you're prohibited from going there unless you have that karmic connection," which is fascinating, really. And there's been films made about it. I mean, Frank Capra, one of my favorite directors, Lost Horizon, which you can Google. You can't really find it on Netflix or anything, but it's the British Prime Minister. His plane crashes in the Himalaya Mountains, and he finds this idyllic world, and he has to get back because he's running for Prime Minister, and so he comes back to England, but he longs to find it again. He spends the rest of his life trying to find that lost village, and he finds it. Now, that's not Inner Earth, but it's kind of allegorical for this idyllic place where few have stumbled upon, but many have spoken about.
Yeah, I saw that there were several writings, and I hope I'm not getting them confused, but I believe the author's name was Nansen and wrote about the Anna race that is pre-Noah, and there was also, I don't know if it's the same source, but there was also, I think, a people called the Agartha, Agartha.
Yeah. Well, Agartha is the most famous, Shangri-La, but Agartha is the most famous region of the Inner Earth, or the most famous name for it. And there's been a whole bunch of authors who have written about it, and they've all had their own kind of initiates. Yves Saint Laurent is the one that comes to mind because he wrote about it based upon an initiate who was there and told him about it. So he writes this fantastic book about it, and then panics because he thinks he's revealed too much. It talks about pre-Noah, thousands of people on the earth just took refuge inside the earth, and they're still there. And so he went and took all the books out of the bookstores. He got them all back, and said, okay, I escaped a bullet. And he dies eventually. But then it's discovered that his publisher had one, and the guy who discovered that publishes it. And then all of a sudden there's a whole triage of books about it. And that book and others, Viril, the Coming Race, is another one, really inspired Hitler's Mein Kampf, this notion of an Aryan culture that is exceedingly ancient and pure and advanced and living in harmony. That was his fantasy. And there's many, many stories about people who have encountered that. Viril, the story of the coming race is about these two miners, and the one miner sees that there's this strange light down in the crevice of the mine, and he gets his buddy to help him construct a device to lower them both down there. The device breaks, and they all fall down into the inner earth, and there's this amazing, peaceful civilization there, and and there's giants. So many accounts from different cultures. It's one of those things that's hard to ignore.
So, yeah, no, for sure. The Anna race, is that referring to those pre-Noah times?
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting because, and I don't know if these are other coincidences or if I'm reaching a little bit hard, but first of all, ironically, we have Agartha with an A, we have Anna with an A, we have Aryan with an A, we have Adam, the first man, with an A, Arthur with an A, Atlantis with an A of A's. Alpha is the first letter. Aleph is the first letter, period. Starts with an A is phonetically anyway nowadays. That's a little bit weird, but also in the as you said, the Old Testament in Noah's days and pre-Noah, the people lived to be 700, 800, 900. I think Methuselah was 969 was the oldest, something like that. But also in both the Sumerian and the Egyptian dynastic houses that go back thousands and thousands of years, there was a time where the rulers ruled for enormous chunks of time. And, that's right. And the last one that even had a close to human reign was Gilgamesh, maybe that Gilgamesh of 130 years. And then after that, the kings and the pharaohs ruled for normal time periods, 30 years, 6 years, 23 years. I'm not going in order, but, sort of normal reigns of kings. Maybe the 12-year-old dies in 19 of pox or something. But there's sort of this cutoff time. And I'm wondering if we're talking about the same people.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the Egyptian kings list, the pre-dynastic kings list, that Egyptologists just ignore it because they can't explain it. It goes back 20, 30,000 years of kings living, like you say, hundreds of years at a time. And you think, well, there must be something we don't understand about their way of counting time and chronology. But what if it's actually that's how long they lived, because they were special. They were Nephilim. They were different.
Yeah, that's always one of the theories that's fun thing to kick around. But, I mean, why would they at some point, sort of around the same time point, both cultures, which were, a few thousand miles apart, which is significant then, sort of stop using these long period of times and using, more banal human periods of time. Now, I have maybe another silly question, but if all these people went underground pre-Noah, and if we're to take things literally like the flood, there are actually floods that happened, why wouldn't the waters go down the same holes and entryways as and go there first and wipe those folks out before it started, inundating the above ground earth? Or were they somehow able to seal it? Or has anyone even thought about that or looked into it? Or was it just different parts on, I guess if you got to the poles and the flood was sort of around the equator, Yeah, no,
it's another great question. I mean, I did a show for What on Earth about the Russian borehole, and it goes down 8 miles into the earth, and they found fossils 8 miles into the earth. What? Wow. And huge amounts of water, like lakes and oceans. And then in 2014, all these scientists got together and they've studied the inner crust of the earth, and they've concluded that there's, the earth is 2/3 water on the outside, but there's more water, more oceans on the inside. So, I mean, that's just unbelievable. So if there was a flood, to your point, and was there one flood, or was there just a bunch of local floods? No one is really quite sure, but it appears as though these areas are somehow protected. They're sealed off. But a great flood, you would have thought, would have impacted them, and maybe it did. Maybe it did.
Well, maybe it was just an older form of the same, I'll just call it magic, because I think you used the word magic, that sealed sort of these vaults, these treasures. You know, you figure the closer you get back, further back you go in time to the originator, maybe the power was stronger. Wasn't the viril also the word for the power, sort of like how we would say, I don't know, nuclear or oil or electricity? It was the word.
So viril is really interesting because it's this energy that can be used in battle against your enemy or for healing. And I always hear stuff like that, and I think, that sounds very special, doesn't it? I don't really believe it. When I was in the Philippines, the first time, so this is just about 4 years ago, in the village where Klaus lives now, and he's a tough Austrian guy, but he's in this little tiny seaside village in the Philippines. There's a healer, very famous healer that everyone, the Marcos family, has used, and I've heard these stories that he'll take your eyeball out, he'll clean it, he'll put it back, he'll take your stomach out, clean it, put it back, and I'm like, let me have this guy. Let me at him, because that's BS. And I go there, and I have my GoPro set up on the table, and my friend with he got my iPhone, and he's filming the whole thing, and I'm lying there naked on the bed, except for a sheet he has over me, and I know I've got him. I know he is full of baloney, and I'm just reveling in the fact that I'm going to bust him, and then all of a sudden, I feel like the most intense, ridiculous flamethrower. The heat is so unbelievable that I can't tell if the pain is excruciating or I'm in shock. But he's down around my stomach area, and I feel this thing, it's going right through me, and all of a sudden I sense that there's blood, and I can feel his hand inside of me, and I look down and I'm like, oh my God. So he opens me up with his fingers in 4 places.
You know, that's I don't mean to interrupt, but that sounds strikingly like the description that Alan Cox gave of his own experience as a psychic surgeon. That's how when he first realized he had that gift, or that someone was channeling that gift through him. He believes it's God, it's Jesus. He's a.
This guy said. That's what this guy said.
But it's the same. It was a very similar description. If you go back and listen to that show.
I will listen to it because I have the whole thing on camera, and in my presentation I include photos where you can see the hand is gone inside of me. So I'm thinking to myself, is that viril? Is he inadvertently harnessing viril for healing? But realizing how it felt, I could easily see how it could be turned on its side and used as a weapon, because it felt like somebody was piercing me with a weapon.
Well, obviously, I'm a comics dork, or I aged out of it, but I still love the movies. But that's one of the things the Vision used to do from the Avengers. He could change his density, and he'd put his hand in someone. He'd make his density lighter or thinner, and he'd put his hand in someone, and then he'd make it harder again, which, obviously that'd be very disconcerting to some, and, or it could be fatal, but that was a weapon that I'm calling it's a robot. But yeah, so, that doesn't, in this day and age, when you look at science, it's not that hard to extrapolate things that seem like comic booky or magic and almost the same. So when you have interdimensionality, and pretty much all physicists agree that there's more dimensions, I don't understand that. That's too big a concept for me to understand. But if they're correct and there's places where dimensions meet, I mean, isn't that sort of the same thing if that could be harnessed? And I don't know. So that sort of sounds like that. And maybe there's a physics explanation that we just don't understand yet, which is that viril, that energy, that technology, whether it's a technology or a form of magic. I mean, was it Arthur C. Clarke who said that magic is just science that we haven't discovered yet? Something like that.
Indistinguishable, yeah, from magic. Absolutely. And yeah, just to kind of underscore all this conversation about the hollow earth and the inner earth, I am not an expert on this subject. There are experts out there, I'm sure. I'm somebody who has stumbled across it, and I'm on kind of a mission to and in fact, I'm really frustrated that I can't come from a position of, I've actually dug up this site in the UK, and this is what we found. We're ready to go. Right now, with the COVID laws, we know it's there. 2 satellite images have confirmed, dowsing's confirmed, and now GPS is confirmed. And there's a World Heritage Knights Templar site right down the street, so it's not like it's a big, wild leap of faith that we have what we think we have. But if we dig it up, they could take it from me because I'm breaking the law.
Well, they found more than one underground cave complex, and some, as you pointed out, that are multi-layers. I mean, cities like Paris, Jerusalem, it's not, it's certainly not unheard of. They're still excavating. I always pronounce it incorrectly, but Göbekli Tepe, and they found another site, I think, 20 miles away? But the other thing... Exactly. The other thing about the water underground, I mean, you said it sounds unbelievable, except that within the last year, it's been confirmed that there's water underground in Mars, that there's water underneath the surface or the gas surface of Uranus. It's believed that there's water under the surface of some of the moons of Jupiter. And I believe that I saw on some science sites that there's water in the moon, inside the crust of the moon, or in the, and I've seen that periodically, and then it gets walked back or goes silent on it, but then you hear that NASA is awarding contracts or taking bids for contracts to mine on the moon. So, I mean, if you're going to have people there, you need to have a source of water, even if the people are only there for a few weeks to set up, machination or machines to do it forever. Anyway, I don't want to get too far from your topic on this and the Nephilim, and I understand but I do want to give the listeners just a taste of some of the countries that you outline, and they can Google you, they can go to your website, which are going to give you a chance to actually tell them where can they read your stuff. Let's do it now before I forget.
Sure. AndrewGough.com. It's Andrew, GOUGH.com. And I've got about 45, 50 articles. You'll see that they're about all sorts of things, from bees to the mystery of Stalin's skyscrapers, to Rennes le Chateau. And I was asked to headline Alien Con in the States 2 years ago. And I said, Alien Con? I don't talk about aliens. But yeah, I really fancy going back to the States. So how about, so I wrote Race for the Relics of the Inner Earth, which is a very sincere portrayal of the history of the Hollow Earth, combined with a little bit about my personal quest with Klaus Dana to unearth these relics that are sitting there, and to rewrite history, to take these things out of dark, dreary chambers and put them in museums.
Yeah, some of the places, just for the audience, so if this is a podcast, so it can be anywhere where the internet and where radio waves go. So some of the places and countries that you've chronicled and documented as having inner earth or hollow earth, folklore, legends, traditions, stories, science, history, whatnot. Mexico, Scandinavia, Turkey, Mongolia, North America, Germany, Russia, Peru, Cuba, Brazil. They said Hindu, which, probably is India, but could be several of the surrounding countries. Tibet, Shangri-La. Of course, they're not countries, but Antarctica and the Arctic. So these are just some of the places that you listed in when I scanned one of the major articles there, which was full of information. I have to ask you about Atlantis, because you noted to me that Atlantis is somehow featured here, so we can't do this story without, how does this tie into Atlantis, if at all?
Yeah, I'm one of those guys who gets really kind of frustrated with Atlantis, and I've done a couple shows, big hour-long programs. The last one, I took Zachary, forgive me, Zachary, the current Spock.
Oh.
The chap.
Oh my goodness! It's a short name, Quino, something like that.
Yeah, no, you got it. Forgive me. I took him to
Quinto, Zach Quinto,
to Morocco. So Atlantis is everyone. Anytime you find any submerged city or something that looks to be circular, everyone's like, "It's Atlantis. It's Atlantis." And if you really research Atlantis, they were heathens. They were seafaring warriors. And there was a German chap who has since passed away who created a computer program that said, here's the 147 or whatever it was characteristics that Plato described of Atlantis. There were elephants. There was a mountain range of this height. There was this. There was that. And as you start taking away some of those characteristics, you don't have to go very far. The only place left standing is Morocco. You have the Atlas Mountains. It's outside the Pillars of Hercules, etc. And it fits so well. There's the natural harbor. There's the concentric circles, the exact distance from the natural harbor. But people are so keen on romanticizing Atlantis. There were all sorts of phenomenal advanced civilizations that were decimated over time with natural disasters or just war or passage of time. But I think we fixate too much on Atlantis, and I think that inside the Earth, in the hollow Earth, there will be civilizations that would definitely match the brilliance that we project onto Atlantis.
Yeah, I have often surmised on this show and some others that I've guested on that even if there was an Atlantis, there's no reason for us to think there was only one Atlantis. There's not one New York. There's Tokyo. There's Paris. There's London. There's Moscow. There's Rio de Janeiro. I mean, why would Atlantis be alone as the civilization? So why not there be several that are there? And even in the story of Atlantis, I believe they went to war with an Asian city or culture and they lost. So obviously they weren't the alphas that they thought they were. Anyway, the other thing is that a friend of mine, and Jimmy Time, if you're listening, I know you're going to reach out to me after hearing this. And if you don't reach out to me, I know that you're not listening. So I may be talking to myself, but he brought to my attention, he said, read about the Eye of Mauritania. And now I know Mauritania isn't Morocco, but it's not that far.
Exactly. I feature that in my article on Was Atlantis Morocco. It's not far at all. I mean, I've tried to go there repeatedly, and they won't let you near it. You can't fly over it. It's kind of a military area, but it's absolutely fascinating and fits the concentric circle thing to the T.
Yeah, there's a spiral mandala, which I think they said is they're saying it's natural, but I mean, it basically looks like if you had a dual incline Phillips head screw on there, it's basically a spiraling mandala, literally going downward. Almost how modern quarries are built, except it's 25 miles in diameter?
Yeah.
Which would be an amazing excavation. I think also they surmise that like a planet crashed into the Earth and sort of made landfall there and went into the core, which, by the way, doesn't rule out the fact that that's what was the original passage to the Hollow Earth to begin with, before there were people, or maybe, before there was anything living, was that caused the original opening. But I forgot what the name of that structure is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. It was something with an R. It's like the Rokahet or something. But it's got a name, and
which structure is this?
The Eye of Mauritania. I mean, it actually has there's actually like a real word that's used for beyond the Eye of Mauritania. I'll get you talking on something, and I'll Google it. And again, Jimmy Time, this is your fault because I researched this for a show we were supposed to do and we didn't do it. So if I don't repeat it, I forget it.
I mean, if your listeners are familiar with Michael Cremo and his really systematic account of here's a site that was 5,000 years old. Here's why we know it was 5,000 years old. And the archaeologists got discredited. Here's a site that's 30,000 years old. And here's a site that's 150, 500, 1 million years old, and why it has to be that age from pure archaeological record. Once you realize that civilization is as old as it is, then you're forgiven for the fact that the Bosnian pyramids don't look like pyramids, or the concentric circle that we're talking about now could actually be man-made and not natural, because you have hundreds of thousands of years of erosion. There's the great sort of black stones from Mexico or Colombia. And these black stones, a lot of them have precious stones in the black stones, but they show dinosaurs and humans together. And the doctor who purchased them created a museum, and he wrote a book. Then Eric von Daniken interviews the guy who sold him the stones that have dinosaurs and humans on them, and he said, "Yeah, I made it all up." The doctor had a lot of money, but later that guy said, "No, I lied. If I told the truth, I would have gone to jail, because you can't sell artifacts." We found these artifacts in the ground that show humans with dinosaurs. The doctor had a lot of money, so I am guilty of having made some other ones that look similar to them. But the original ones were all authentic and found in the ground. So there's these artifacts that just defy explanation. As well as structures. I mean, there's megalithic structures in Baalbek, in Egypt, and Peru, and Russia. That how would that unfinished obelisk ever have been lifted up when it was finished? There's lost technologies, right, of acoustics and all sorts of harmonics that we just can't fathom. That were probably quite ordinary back in the day.
Well, by the way, it's called the RICHAT. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but it's RICHAT structure, and it's in it's the Mauritania Plateau in the Sahara. So I'm not even sure that it's actually in Mauritania, the country. It just the country might get its name from the plateau. I'm not sure, so it might be Morocco. Anyway, it's darn close. It's Northwest Africa. And yeah, I mean, and I've heard that theory before, and I wouldn't be surprised if people rejected that Atlantis was from Africa because of a sort of an Aryan thing, because it wouldn't be white people. It would be African people. And that, that might be a theory that might be why people sort of reject it, which is, I mean, sort of silly for a whole bunch of reasons, but notwithstanding that, the Carthaginians were rivals to the Romans, and if not for a daring and rather cruel tactic by the Roman general, conventional wisdom anyway has it that the Carthaginians would have won that war. All right, enough about me rambling. I have to ask you about this because you talked about ancient drug lords, and I get the feeling that you're not talking about the Medicis, or Capone or anything like that. So please tell me what you mean by ancient drug lords.
Yeah, I've nobody's really understood where the Minoan culture got their wealth, and I've looked into, as part of my research into the esoteric history of bees and the business of bees, and how big drugs were in the ancient world. I mean, opium and opiates were just huge in ancient Egypt. And obviously in Greece, you'd have the Python, you have the queen bee, and she would be off her head having consumed psychedelic honey. And the priest would interpret her wild, crazed utterances and make a prediction for the king on what the priestess had said. But I looked at, when I was in Crete in the museums, their own replicas of their boats that they would send to the mainlands and all around the Mediterranean. And they had these honeycomb-shaped deposits on the bottom of the boat that appeared to be maybe 10 inches deep. It's hard to get the scale just right. And then I realized that their veneration of the bee was, second to none. The Malia bee pendant is from Crete, the most famous, one of the most famous relics from the Bronze Age is.
Did you say the bee pendant?
The Malia bee pendant.
But like bees that you studied the bees?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then now we're tying things to you.
Yeah. And so to make a long story short, I realized the Minoans were growing poppies in 4 different regions on Crete. They're also growing and in possession of hallucinogenic honey. No one knows where they got their wealth from. The boats that they use for commerce show where they would have put glass vials or some kind of containers of presumably liquid. Why else would they have to be in these uniform sort of cash containers? So I believe that they were taking the hallucinogenic honey, which is well known in that part of the world, combining it with heroin. So poppies, opium, heroin, and you'd have this little concoction that turned you into the drug lords of the Aegean. And what's interesting is when Thera erupts and it's game over for the Minoans and a lot of other Mediterranean civilizations, all of a sudden apiaries spring up on the mainlands everywhere. And the most famous one is in Israel, and it dates right to the time after Thera. So, people have lost their supply of honey and all its wonderful medicinal usages, but also psychedelic usages, like was used in Greece. And if you go to Greece and you see the oracle, the great oracle, the navel of the world, what is it? It's a beehive. It's a beehive in stone with crisscross bees going all around it and a hole in the middle where the bees can go. I mean, bees were so central. I mean, Egypt is the land of the bee. The pharaoh's title is beekeeper. There's a picture of the bee in the pharaoh's cartouche. No one even talks about that. Why? And it's because of many things, the medicinal, ritualistic, and psychedelic uses of the bee's byproducts, but also the way the queen bee kind of rules and the way that the ecosystem kind of all works and pulls together. Very important sort of creatures, really.
That is amazing, and that's great. That stuff on Knossos and the Minoan civilization. I did not know anything about that. I did not know anything about the sort of the interesting stories around bees. The way you described the unknown wealth of the Minoans, which I have heard that before, reminded me, and I've never put it together before, is sort of, the mystery of the Templars' wealth. How did they accumulate so much wealth? So it may not be related at all. Just sort of, I don't know. Since we were talking about earlier, there's sort of like a responsive chord. So before we finish up, we need to, because we are talking about the Nephilim archaeology conference, we need to try to bring this back to the Nephilim at least, or at least what have you learned or what parallels have you seen related to the Nephilim or Nephilim? I think most people call it the Nephilim. I say the Nephilim because I'm not educated in these areas. But what have you learned, or what have you put together, or what parallels have you seen, or conclusions have you drawn, or I don't know, just anything that since you got involved with the conference and looked into it, light bulbs went off and you said, this is interesting. This ties to the Nephilim, or could tie to the Nephilim.
I really think there's been a lot of different, again, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. How dare we think we are its only civilized inhabitants? And so for hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions, there are artifacts that show humans with dinosaurs. We can't phantom that, but what if it was real? And what if, to your point, we see all these photos of these planets all over the solar system. You don't see skyscrapers, do you? But what if the civilizations are all underneath the planets? And what if the access is at the poles? And you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I mean, the surface of a planet is just pounded by all kinds of things over time, comets and meteorites and weird sort of tidal events. So I think the Nephilim were real. I think they are a race that inhabited Earth and on the outside, the world that we know, but I think they also continue to exist in one form or another inside the Earth. I think it's just a really, really interesting tradition, because nobody knows the Nephilim were good or bad. The jury's out. Goliath sounds like he was a bad guy, and David slew him, right? But what if the Nephilim are good guys? It's not really clear. And they're fallen angels, is another interpretation of them. But whatever they were, I suspect, like all races, there's good Nephilim and bad Nephilim. But they're with us today, and they're living in different regions inside the Earth, if we are to believe first-hand accounts and traditions of every country on the planet. So what I think is interesting, and we didn't really touch on in detail, is that more than one of these books written with the aid of an initiate who's from the inner Earth say that they're coming back. And they all have the same projection of when they're coming back, and that's around 2029, 2030. And those predictions were made a very long time ago, like over 100 years ago, and more. And I think that is really interesting, because it kind of ties into some of what's going on with the world affairs today, this great battle that millions of us perceive to be happening and billions of us don't. What if we're not victorious? What if we have to be rescued, like Bird said? Bird was told, so many of these first-hand accounts were told that, when your world is in ruins, we'll be there to reboot it with the arts and sciences and things that you'll need to thrive. So I think it's a fascinating time to observe. Again, I'm by no means an expert on this subject. I've come into it sort of sideways. I'm fascinated by it. I'm learning as I go. And I'd love to come back with some good news about what we dug out of the ground in England. And maybe there'll be some real hard evidence of Nephilim in what we find.
Yeah, no, well, whatever you find there, I certainly want to hear about it. And either way, I want to hear about the bees again. I sort of gave us a preview of that, perhaps. And also, so I can't pronounce the gentleman's name, or at least not now, but the real source of the Da Vinci Code. So those are all interesting things that we could talk about.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Yes, well, we'd be happy to have you anytime. Unfortunately, we ended on a hopeful and happy note. You were getting really somber there, which is a really perfect way to end the Garden of Doom.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's all right. It's probably better. I mean, I focus a little bit too much on the Doom and not enough on the Garden. So I have the information here. It is the Nephilim Anthropology Conference, Saturday, April 24th. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, the only thing that might be an issue for people in my part of the world, which is East Coast United States, is the time, because it's in the UK, which is 5 hours ahead. So it looks like it's 6 a.m. my time to 12 noon my time, which of course would be 11 a.m. to, I guess, about 5 p.m. there, which is a perfectly normal time for a conference. But it is video. It is Zoom, so you don't have to get dressed, you don't have to shave, you don't really even have to leave your bed, and then you can take a nap afterwards. But I also believe that there is a way to just purchase the video as well. Anyway, so it's NACON, NACON, and it's at Eventbrite, which is one word, co.uk. But probably the easiest thing is just to look for Nephilim Anthropology Conference on Facebook, say you're interested, and you could link to purchasing tickets. And the price of this is very affordable. I mean, even if you think that everything we talked about is absolute nonsense, but you like the Da Vinci Code or like Tolkien or like anything, it's only like $25 American to hear everything. I think there's I know there's a VIP level as well, which probably gets you more access, and that's closer to 60 or 65 American. But that's really not that much for a day's worth of entertainment, and probably some more as well. So, and if you don't think it's all nonsense, or if you think some of it is and some of it isn't, well, the speakers here don't all agree too. Because we just heard Andrew say that he thinks that there's Nephilim that are good and that are bad. And I happen to know that Alan thinks that they're all bad. And I believe that Dr. Parry and said the same thing. So this is not all like-minded individuals. You're going to hear different versions, different perspectives, different expertise, different research disciplines. So if nothing else, it's going to be interesting. I'm sure it's going to be very informative. You were great. You were really interesting. So I thank you so much, and would love to have you on again. After your discovery, hopeful discovery, or even before that time about the bees and the Da Vinci Code. So that'd be really cool. I thank you very much for your time. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to plug while we've got a minute or so?
No, I'm good. If you get a chance to watch the 2-hour season premiere of Forbidden History Series 6, it's on iPlayers everywhere. You'll get a chance to see myself and Klaus Donna in action in some deep treasure vaults in the Philippines. But that's all. Really appreciate everyone's time. And Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Let's do it again.
Yeah, I look forward to it. All right, well, thanks very much. Thank you for joining us here on the Garden of Doom. And Andrew, have a successful conference and good luck with everything. I know it's late there, so feel free to go to bed and dream about that Templar treasure and magic that you're going to command one day.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff.
Take care now. All right, folks, I just said goodbye to Andrew. So a lot of content there, a lot of really interesting stuff. Some places I did not expect to go, but that's what happens with interviews, and that's what happens with discussions. Probably some things that you weren't expecting either. I hope so as well. A little bit of information going forward. I'm supposed to do another interview with a speaker over the weekend who's an Egyptologist. So that should be really interesting, and also an Oxford author. So another author with some scholarship behind them. And next week, I'm going to speak to at least one, if not two more. So hopefully the beat will go on with that. This Sunday, we revisit the Land of the Lost with the All-Star panel. So we're going to have this very chock full of deep, somber, sober, sometimes scary, but fascinating topic to the Land of the Lost, which, has some of the same undertones, but in a much more frivolous kind of way and in a fun way. But that's definitely going to be the lighter show this week. So there will be 2 shows this week, and next week there could be 3. Who knows? So we'll have our NACON speakers and then a regular show on Sunday. So all is good, and I've got guests booked into June. Not every single week set, but there are gaps in there, but some of that's by design. So anyway, thank you for listening. Take care. See you later. And more garden, right? More garden, yes.
with flowers in their heads said, hey boy, do you want a score? And you know how it is, I really don't know what time it was. Oh, oh, oh. So asked him if I could stay a while. I didn't notice, but it had got very dark, and I was really out of my mind. Just then a policeman stepped up to me as the said these hey would be kept to all get in line, get in line. Well, you know, they asked us to stay for tea and have some fun. Oh, oh, oh. He said that his friends will all drop by. Ooh. Why don't you take a good look at yourself and describe what you see? And baby, 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 do you like it? There you sit, sitting spare like a book on a shelf, but still